The training vessel Horizon's Edge moved through the darkness of space like a sleeping giant. It was 3 in the morning according to ship time, and most of the crew was deep in dreams. The hallways were quiet. The lights were dim. Only the soft hum of the engines broke the silence. Fleet Instructor stood alone in the observation room, her fingers resting on the control panel. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes from decades of watching young cadets make mistakes. She had trained thousands of officers during her career. Humans and a dozen other species had passed through her program. Most of them became decent officers. Some became great ones. A few had died in the line of duty, and she remembered every single name. Tonight, she was going to run a simple drill, engine failure during faster-than-light travel. It was one of the oldest tests in the Academy's collection, designed over 200 years ago when the Galactic Coalition was still young. The scenario was simple. The solution was well documented. Every cadet learned the 17-step protocol during their first year of training. Had run this drill perhaps 1,000 times. She knew exactly what would happen. The alarms would sound. The cadets would panic for a few seconds. Then training would take over, and they would follow the steps one by one until the simulated crisis was resolved. The pass rate was 94%, and the 6% who failed usually learned enough from the experience to pass on their second attempt. She checked the bridge crew roster on her screen. Tonight's night shift was a mixed group. 3 cadets were assigned to navigation and communications. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large eyes that saw well in low light. They were known throughout the galaxy for their careful and methodical thinking. They never rushed. They never made careless mistakes. They were, in his opinion, sometimes too careful, but they were reliable. 2 engineers were stationed at the technical consoles. They were shorter than humans, with rough gray skin and 4 arms that made them excellent mechanics. They could take apart an engine and put it back together in half the time it took any other species. Liked working with. They complained a lot, but they always got the job done. And then there was the human. Cadet pulled up his file and studied it again. He was 26 years old, which made him older than most cadets. He had spent 4 years working on merchant ships before applying to the Academy. His test scores were average. His physical fitness was average. His psychological evaluation described him as quiet, observant, and unremarkable. He kept to himself. He did his work. He caused no trouble. Had barely noticed him during the 6 months he had been aboard the Horizon's Edge. He was the kind of person who faded into the background, who did exactly what was expected and nothing more. She had dozens of cadets like him over the years. Most of them became competent junior officers who served quietly until retirement. There was nothing wrong with that. The fleet needed reliable people who could follow orders and do their jobs without drama. She closed his file and prepared the simulation. Lieutenant Bora entered the observation room with 2 cups of tea. She was teaching assistant, a young Korean woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. She had been student 10 years ago and had returned to the Academy to help train the next generation. Another late-night drill, Bora asked, handing one of the cups. The best time to test them, replied. Real emergencies don't wait for convenient hours. They will handle it perfectly, Bora said with a slight smile. They always do. We'll see. Activated the simulation at exactly 300 hours. The effect was immediate. Throughout the ship, alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The deck vibrated as the engines began their simulated failure sequence. On the bridge, the peaceful night shift turned into chaos in the space of a heartbeat. Watched through the observation room screens as the cadets reacted. At the navigation console jumped in his seat, then quickly composed himself and began checking his instruments. The engineers immediately moved toward the engineering station, their 4 arms already reaching for tools and diagnostic equipment. The other began running communication checks, preparing to send distress signals as the protocol required. And Cadet sat very still at his station. frowned. Freezing was a common response to sudden stress, especially among younger cadets, but had 4 years of merchant fleet experience. He should have seen emergency situations before. He should have been moving, doing something, following the training that had been drilled into him for months. Instead, he just sat there, his eyes moving across his console, not panicked, not frozen, just watching. "What is he doing?" Bora asked, leaning closer to the screen. "I don't know yet." On the bridge, the lead began calling out orders. His name was, and he was one of the most promising cadets in the current class. His voice was calm and steady as he directed his teammates through the first steps of the emergency protocol. Engineering, begin power reroute sequence alpha. Communications, prepare emergency beacon. Navigation, calculate exit trajectory from FTL space. They acknowledged and began working at their stations. Their hands moved with practiced speed as they pulled up diagnostic screens and began the rerouting process. The communications and navigation followed their own portions of the protocol with perfect precision. The simulation timer showed 73 seconds remaining. At the current rate, they would complete the protocol with about 10 seconds to spare. A passing grade, if not an exceptional one. Then moved. He didn't follow the protocol, saw it immediately. Instead of joining the coordinated effort, he began typing commands into his console that had nothing to do with the standard procedure. His fingers moved fast, faster than she expected from someone with average test scores. "He's accessing the auxiliary power grid," Bora said, confusion in her voice. "That's step 11. They haven't even completed step 3 yet." "I can see that." Wasn't just skipping ahead. He was pulling systems that weren't part of the engine failure protocol at all. Watched in growing disbelief as he accessed navigation, life support, and weapons controls, routing small amounts of power from each into a configuration she had never seen before. "Should I stop him?" Bora asked. "He's going to interfere with the others." Hesitated. Academy rules allowed her to pause the simulation if a cadet was putting the exercise at risk, but something held her back. Something in the way was moving, with purpose and precision, like he knew exactly what he was doing even though what he was doing made no sense. "Not yet," she said. "Let's see where this goes." The engineers were starting to notice that something was wrong. Their diagnostics were showing power fluctuations that shouldn't be happening. One of them called out too, pointing at his screen with two of his arms while the other two continued working. Turn to look at. "Cadet, what are you doing? Return to the standard protocol immediately." Didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on his console, his fingers still moving. "Cadet, acknowledge." 43 seconds remaining. And then everything stopped. The alarms went silent. The red lights faded to normal. The engine indicators on every screen shifted from critical red to stable green in a wave that swept across the entire bridge. The simulation was over. Everyone stared at their consoles in confusion. They looked at each other. They checked their instruments again and again as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Stood frozen in the middle of the bridge, his order still hanging in the air. Leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. He looked tired, as if he had just run a great distance. The simulation clock read 31 seconds remaining. In the observation room, and Bora sat in stunned silence. They had watched cadets pass this drill hundreds of times. They had never seen anyone finish it this fast. They had never seen anyone finish it like this. "What just happened?" Bora whispered. Pulled up the performance logs. She had to see the numbers. She had to understand what she had just witnessed. The logs opened on her screen, and for a long moment she simply stared at them. Her tea grew cold in her hand. Her heart beat faster in her chest. "Instructor," Bora asked, "what do the logs say?" Didn't answer. She couldn't. The number on the screen was impossible. The number on the screen changed everything she thought she knew about training, about cadets, about humans. She reached for her communication device and called for an emergency review. Something extraordinary had just happened, and she needed to understand what it meant. The bridge of the horizon's edge was still quiet in the aftermath of the drill. The cadets remained at their stations, unsure of what to do next. The squad leader kept looking between his console and with an expression that mixed confusion with something close to anger. "I don't understand," he said, his voice tight. "We were following protocol, we were on schedule. What did you do?" Turned in his chair to face him. His face showed no pride, no satisfaction. If anything, he looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "The protocol wouldn't have worked," he said simply. "There was a secondary fault." "A secondary fault? Where? I saw nothing on my displays." "It wasn't on the displays yet. It was in the backup regulators." One of the engineers, a gruff older cadet named, climbed down from his station and walked over. His 4 arms crossed over his chest in a gesture of disbelief. "I've been working with ship systems for 15 years before joining the academy. Backup regulators don't show problems on standard diagnostics until they actually fail. How did you know?" Hesitated, he seemed to be searching for words that would make sense. "The lights," he finally said, "on Deck 7, they flickered when the alarm started." "Lights flicker during emergencies," said. "That's normal." "Not like that. The lights on Deck 7 use a separate power conduit that connects directly to the backup regulators. When those regulators are drawing uneven power, the lights flicker at a different frequency, about 2% faster than the others." Silence fell over the bridge. Every cadet was staring at now. "You noticed a 2% difference in light flicker frequency during an emergency alarm?" asked slowly. "Yes." "And from that, you calculated the entire backup regulator problem?" "It wasn't really a calculation, I just saw it, the pattern. Once I noticed the lights, everything else followed." In the observation room, and Bora listened through the audio feed. Bora was shaking her head slowly, as if trying to wake herself from a strange dream. "I designed that simulation," said quietly. "I added the secondary fault 3 years ago because the pass rates were too high. I wanted to make sure cadets couldn't achieve perfect scores just by following the protocol mindlessly." "You hit a trap in the simulation." "Not a trap exactly. A challenge. The secondary fault kicks in at the 40-second mark. If cadets follow the standard protocol perfectly, they finish just before it triggers. But they never have time to spare. They never finish 30 seconds early. That's supposed to be impossible." "But he saw it coming," Bora said. "He compensated before it even happened." "He compensated before it showed up on any diagnostic, before any sensor detected it. He saw lights flicker on a deck camera and worked out the entire cascade failure in his head." Stood and began packing the small observation room. Her mind was racing through possibilities, trying to find an explanation that made sense. "Maybe he cheated," Bora suggested. "Maybe someone told him about the secondary fault." "No one knows about it except me. I programmed it myself on a private terminal using encrypted files. And even if someone had told him, knowing about the fault wouldn't help. The solution he used wasn't in any manual. I've never seen anyone route power that way. It shouldn't even work." "But it did work." "Yes, it worked perfectly." Stopped packing and looked at the logs again. The number still stared back at her, unchanged and impossible. The Unified Cognitive Response Index was the standard measurement of mental performance in the Galactic Coalition. It had been developed 2 centuries ago by a team of scientists from 12 different species. The scale went from 0 to 100. Any score below 30 was considered impaired. 30 to 50 was below average. 50 to 70 was average. 70 to 85 was above average. Anything above 85 was exceptional. The highest score ever recorded was 97.3, achieved by an admiral during a battle that had become legendary across the galaxy. She had coordinated 17 ships simultaneously, while under heavy fire, saving 11,000 lives through a series of decisions so brilliant that military academies still studied them. Score was 147.2. Not just exceptional, not just record-breaking. The number went beyond the scale entirely, into territory that the original creators of the index had never imagined possible. "The system must be broken," Bora said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I ran 3 diagnostic sweeps while you were getting tea. The equipment is perfect. The software is perfect. The calibration is perfect." "Then what do we do?" Picked up her communication device and began making calls. Within 2 hours, the observation room was crowded with senior academy staff. Admiral, the commander of the training fleet, sat in the largest chair with his 4 arms folded and his expression grim. Doctor, the academy's chief analyst, stood by the holographic display with data tablets clutched in her hands. Representatives from the and human divisions had also arrived, filling the small space almost to capacity. The air was thick with tension and whispered conversations. "Show us," Admiral commanded. Activated the recording. The assembled officers watched in silence as the drill played out on the holographic display. They saw the alarms. They saw the cadets react. They saw sit still while everyone else moved. And then they saw him work. The room was absolutely quiet as his hands moved across the console. The display showed his commands in real time, highlighting each system he accessed, each redirect of power, each connection he made between components that had no business being connected. When the simulation ended with 31 seconds remaining, no one spoke for a long moment. "That's not possible," said the representative, a tall woman named Ambassador. "The human mind cannot process that many variables simultaneously. Our own cognitive models show that no species in the coalition can manage more than 7 independent information streams at once. He was managing at least 15. 16, Doctor corrected quietly. "I counted." "Then your count is wrong." "I counted 3 times. 16 distinct information streams, processed in parallel, synthesized into a coherent solution in approximately 4 seconds. Admiral unfolded his arms and leaned forward. "Doctor, explain to me in simple terms what we are seeing." Pulled up a comparison chart on the holographic display. The standard emergency protocol is designed around the cognitive limits of coalition species. It breaks complex problems into sequential steps that any trained mind can handle one at a time. Step 1 feeds into Step 2, which feeds into Step 3, and so on. This approach is slower than simultaneous processing, but it's reliable because it works within our known limits. She pointed to a diagram of solution. Cadet didn't follow the sequence. He saw the entire problem at once, including a hidden variable that hadn't even manifested yet, and he solved all of it simultaneously by connecting systems that our protocols specifically keep separate. "Why do we keep them separate?" the human representative asked. "Because the calculations required to connect them are considered too complex for real-time processing. The interactions between navigation, life support, weapons, and engineering power systems create a mathematical matrix with thousands of variables. Our computers can handle it. No known biological brain can." "Except apparently his brain can," Bora said. Nodded slowly. "Apparently so." Admiral stood and walked to the display, studying solution with the expert eye of someone who had spent 50 years working with ships. "I've seen humans do strange things," he said. "In combat, in emergencies, in situations where logic says they should fail. They sometimes find solutions that no one expected. We usually call it luck or instinct." He turned to face the room. "Perhaps we've been wrong about what human instinct actually is." Ambassador shook her head. "One cadet doesn't prove anything. This could be a malfunction, a fluke, a one-time anomaly. Before we make any dramatic claims about human cognition, we need more data." "I agree," said. But in the meantime, we need to decide what to do with Cadet. He's still on the bridge, probably wondering why everyone has been called to an emergency meeting in the middle of the night. Bring him in, Admiral ordered. I want to hear him explain what he did in his own words. Nodded and reached for her communication device. But before she could make the call, her screen flashed with an incoming message. It was from the Academy's Central Command. They had been monitoring the training vessel's logs remotely, as they always did. They had seen the impossible number, and they were sending a high-level delegation to investigate. This was no longer just an Academy matter. This had become something much bigger. Looked at the message and felt the weight of what was coming settle on her shoulders. Whatever happened next would change not just life, but possibly the way the entire coalition thought about human beings. She hoped the quiet young cadet was ready for that kind of attention. She doubted anyone could be. Sat alone in the small waiting room outside the observation deck. He had been sitting there for 3 hours now, watching officers of various species hurry past without looking at him. No one had told him what was happening. No one had explained why he was pulled from the bridge while everyone else was sent back to their quarters. He knew he had done something unusual during the drill. He just didn't realize how unusual. The door finally opened and Fleet Instructor stepped out. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and tension in her shoulders. But when she saw him, something in her expression softened slightly. "Cadet, please come with me." He followed her through a series of corridors he had never walked before, deeper into the command section of the ship. They passed security checkpoints staffed by armed guards. They passed doors marked with classification symbols that meant he wasn't supposed to know what lay behind them. Finally, they reached a large conference room. The door slid open and stepped inside. The room was filled with senior officers. He recognized Admiral from the official portraits that hung in the Academy halls. He saw representatives from several coalition species, all of them wearing expressions of intense interest as they turned to look at him. He felt like a small animal that had wandered into a den of predators. "Please sit down," said gently, gesturing to an empty chair at the center of the room. Sat, his hands were shaking slightly, so he clasped them together in his lap where no one could see. Admiral leaned forward. Despite his intimidating appearance, his voice was calm and curious. "Cadet, do you know why you're here?" "No, sir. I just did what the situation required." "And what did the situation require?" Thought about how to explain. It was hard to put into words something that felt so natural to him. "The standard protocol wouldn't have worked," he said. "There was a hidden problem in the backup power regulators. If we had followed the normal steps, the cascade would have happened anyway. We would have failed." "How did you know about this hidden problem?" "The lights on Deck 7, they were flickering wrong." "Wrong how?" "Too fast. By about 2%. That only happens when the backup regulators are drawing uneven power. So I knew they were going to fail before the main diagnostics caught it." Doctor stepped forward with a data tablet. "Cadet, I'd like you to walk us through your solution step by step. Can you do that?" Tried, he really did. But as he spoke, he could see the confusion growing on their faces. The connections that seemed so obvious to him were apparently invisible to everyone else. "You pulled power from the navigation buffer," said, studying her tablet. "Why?" "Because the navigation system uses a different frequency regulator than engineering. By routing a small amount of navigation power through the weapon's coolant system and back into engineering, I could create a bridge that bypassed the failing regulators entirely. But the weapon's coolant system is completely separate from the power grid. It is on paper, but there's a physical junction point in Section 47 where the cooling pipes pass through the same conduit as the secondary power cables. At that junction, you can induce a small power transfer through thermal conductivity if you time it correctly." Silence fell over the room. You induced power transfer through thermal conductivity, repeated slowly. Yes, it's only about 3% efficiency, but 3% was enough. Admiral exchanged glances with the other senior officers. Couldn't read their expressions. He didn't know if he was in trouble or not. Cadet said, "Have you always been able to see things this way?" Considered the question. Memories flickered through his mind. Strange moments throughout his life when he had known things he shouldn't know, seen patterns that others couldn't see. "I think so," he said. "When I was young, I thought everyone could do it. I thought I was just paying attention while others weren't. It wasn't until I got older that I realized I was different." Different how? "I see connections. Between things, between people, between events. Everything talks to everything else, and sometimes I can hear the conversation. It's like music almost. Each system has its own rhythm, its own pattern. And when something is wrong, the rhythm changes. I hear the discord before anyone else sees the problem." Ambassador, the representative, spoke for the first time. "You're describing intuition. All species have some form of intuitive reasoning. What you did goes far beyond normal intuition." "I don't have another word for it," said quietly. "My grandmother used to call it. She said some people are born with the ability to read rooms, to sense what others are thinking, to understand situations without being told. She had it too, a little bit. But she said mine was stronger than anyone she had ever met." "Your grandmother was human." "Yes. And she observed this ability in you from childhood. She was the first to notice. When I was 5 years old, I told my father that our neighbor was going to sell his house before the neighbor had even decided to do it. I just knew. I saw the way he looked at his garden, the way his wife had stopped buying new furniture, the small changes in their routine that meant they were preparing to leave. 3 weeks later, the house was on the market." Was taking notes furiously. "This is remarkable. You're describing pattern recognition at a level we've never documented in any species." "Is that bad?" asked. Shook her head quickly. "No, Cadet, it's not bad at all. It's just unexpected." Admiral stood and walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of. Despite the Admiral's size and rank, his eyes were not unkind. "Son, I've been serving in the Coalition fleet for 53 years. I've worked alongside every species in known space. I've seen acts of brilliance and acts of stupidity in equal measure. What you did tonight wasn't like anything I've ever witnessed." He placed one of his 4 hands on shoulder. "The Unified Cognitive Response Index is the standard by which we measure mental performance across all Coalition species. The scale goes from 0 to 100. The highest score ever recorded was 97.3, achieved by an admiral who became a legend." Swallowed hard. "What was my score?" 147.2. The number hung in the air like something physical, something with weight and presence. "That's impossible," whispered. "The scale only goes to 100. "That's what we thought too, and yet here we are." Felt dizzy. The room seemed to spin slightly around him. He gripped the arms of his chair to steady himself. "What does this mean?" he asked. Admiral looked back at the assembled officers. Some of them appeared excited, others appeared worried, a few appeared almost frightened. "We don't know yet," the Admiral admitted. "That's what we need to find out. Central Command is sending a delegation to investigate further. You'll be reassigned to a special program for advanced evaluation." "Am I being punished?" "No, Cadet, you're being studied. There's a significant difference." Stepped forward. "I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to understand something. You have a gift we don't fully understand yet. How that gift is used, how it's developed, how it's integrated into Coalition operations. Those decisions will shape the future in ways we can't predict." "No pressure," said weakly. For the first time since the meeting began, several officers laughed. "Get some rest, Cadet," Admiral said, clapping him on the shoulder again. "You've had a long night, tomorrow will be even longer. As was escorted back to his quarters, he thought about his grandmother. She had died 3 years ago, just before he joined the academy. She had always believed he was special, even when he doubted himself. He wished she could see him now. He wished she could tell him whether this was a blessing or a curse. He wished she could explain why, among all the species in the galaxy, humans were sometimes capable of things that shouldn't be possible. But she was gone, and he was alone, and the weight of that impossible number pressed down on him like a mountain. 147.2. The number that changed everything. 3 days passed before the delegation from Central Command arrived. 3 days during which was kept separate from the other cadets, confined to a private quarters with guards posted outside his door. He wasn't a prisoner exactly, but he wasn't free either. They brought him meals. They brought him books. They even brought him a tablet loaded with entertainment programs. But no one spoke to him except to ask if he needed anything. The isolation gave him time to think, too much time perhaps. He thought about his childhood in the small coastal town where he had grown up. He remembered watching the fishing boats come in each morning, knowing which ones would have good catches and which ones wouldn't before they even reached the dock. He remembered sitting in school, bored because he already knew what the teacher was going to say before they said it. He remembered the looks his classmates gave him when he answered questions too quickly, too accurately, with too much detail. He had learned to hide, to pretend, to hold back. "Don't show off," his mother had told him once, after another parent complained that was making their child feel stupid. Being smart is good, but being liked is better. So he had dulled himself. He had stopped raising his hand in class. He had given wrong answers on purpose to seem more normal. By the time he was a teenager, he had become so good at hiding that even he sometimes forgot what he was capable of. The merchant fleet had been a relief. Ships didn't care if you were strange. They only cared if you could do the job, and had discovered that he could do the job better than anyone expected, as long as he was careful not to show exactly how much better. But during that drill, he had forgotten to hide. The emergency had been so sudden, the danger so clear, that his instincts had taken over before he could stop them. Now everyone knew. On the 4th day, Fleet Instructor came to his quarters. She brought tea and a plate of honey cookies, which surprised him. It was the kind of gesture his grandmother would have made. "May I sit?" she asked. "Of course, ma'am." She sat across from him at the small table and poured tea for both of them. For a moment, she just looked at him, studying his face with the same careful attention she probably gave to all her cadets. "The delegation arrives tomorrow," she said. "I wanted to talk to you before they do." "Am I in trouble?" "No, but you're about to become very important, and I want to make sure you're prepared for what that means." Sipped his tea. It was good, fragrant, and warm. "What does it mean?" "It means people will want things from you. Some of them will want to study you, to understand how your mind works. Some will want to use you, to put your abilities to work for their own purposes. And some will fear you, because things we don't understand often frighten us." "Do you fear me?" Smiled slightly. "No, I've been training cadets for 20 years. I've seen every kind of mind the galaxy has to offer. You're unusual, but you're not frightening. You're just a young man who sees the world differently than most people. That's more credit than most give me." "Tell me about your grandmother." The question caught him off guard. "My grandmother?" "You mentioned her during the interview. You said she had two. I'm curious about her." Set down his teacup and thought about how to describe her. Her name was. She was born in a small village in the mountains, before Korea was unified, before humans even had faster-than-light travel. She lived through wars and famines and the discovery of alien life. She was the strongest person I ever knew. "How did she discover your ability?" "She watched me. That was her way. She never asked questions directly. She just observed. When I was very young, she would take me to the market and ask me which merchants were honest and which were cheating. I always knew. I could see it in their eyes, in how they arranged their goods, in the way they spoke to their regular customers versus the tourists. And she wasn't surprised by your accuracy. No, she just nodded like she had expected it. Later, when I was older, she told me that her own mother had been the same way, and her grandmother before that. She said the gift ran in families, that some bloodlines carried it stronger than others. Leaned forward with interest. Did she have any explanation for what causes it? She thought it was evolution. She said humans had always needed to read situations quickly to survive. Who could be trusted, who was dangerous, when to fight and when to run. Those who read situations best survived longest and had the most children. Over thousands of generations, the ability got stronger in certain families. That's actually quite sophisticated reasoning. She may have been from a small village, but she was not an uneducated woman. She read everything she could find. She said knowledge was the only wealth that could never be taken away. Nodded slowly. She sounds remarkable. She was. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking their tea. Finally said, I need to tell you something important about what's happening, about why the coalition is so interested in you. I'm listening. For 60 years, humans have been part of the Galactic Coalition. In that time, we've been evaluated, measured, categorized, and ranked alongside every other species. Our cognitive scores are average. Our physical abilities are average. Our sensory capabilities are below average compared to most coalition races. On paper, we're nothing special. I've heard the statistics. But there have always been anomalies. Situations where humans did things that our scores said we shouldn't be able to do. In combat, in diplomacy, in crisis situations. Moments of apparent luck or instinct that turned the tide when logic said we should fail. What kind of situations? Battle of the Void Margin. 3 human pilots held off an enemy fleet for 18 hours against odds of 50-1, using tactics that no computer could have predicted. The Treaty of 7 Moons. A human diplomat resolved a conflict that had lasted for 3 centuries by noticing something in the body language of the delegates that nobody else saw. The rescue of Station 12. A human engineer repaired a dying station's life support using components that were never meant to work together, saving 2,000 lives. I've heard of some of those. They're taught in history classes. What isn't taught is that in every case, when analysts studied the humans involved, they couldn't explain how they did what they did. The methods they used went beyond their training, beyond their experience, beyond anything in the manuals or the protocols. It was like they suddenly became more than they should be. Felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying I'm not the first. I'm saying you're the first we've been able to measure. Whatever happened during that drill, the simulation captured it in detail. We have data now, numbers, evidence that can be studied and analyzed. So I'm proof. You're the beginning of proof. If we can understand what you did and how you did it, we might be able to understand something fundamental about human cognition, something we've been missing all along. Thought about all the times he had hidden his abilities, all the years of pretending to be normal, all the opportunities he had let pass by because he was afraid of standing out. What if I can't explain it? He asked. What if it just happens and I don't know how? Then we learn together. We run tests. We create new drills. We push you until we find your limits if you have any. That sounds exhausting. Laughed softly. It probably will be, but it also might be the most important work you ever do. You have a chance to change how the entire galaxy thinks about humans, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Looked out the small window at the stars drifting past. Somewhere out there were billions of humans living their ordinary lives, never knowing that their species was about to be re-evaluated by the powers of the galaxy. My grandmother always said I was meant for something special, he said quietly. I never believed her. Maybe it's time to start. The next morning, the delegation arrived. 6 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took up positions around the horizon's edge. Admirals and scientists and politicians came aboard in a stream of shuttles, filling the training vessel with important people in important uniforms. And at the center of all that attention stood a quiet young man from a coastal town in Korea, whose grandmother had seen greatness in him long before anyone else. Straightened his shoulders and prepared to meet his future. Whatever happened next, he would not hide anymore. The Coalition High Council chamber was the largest room had ever stood in. It occupied the entire top floor of the Central Command Station, a vast dome of transparent aluminum that looked out on the stars in every direction. Thousands of seats rose in tiers around a central speaking platform, each one occupied by a representative from one of the Coalition's member worlds. Felt very small as she walked to the center of that platform. Her footsteps echoed in the enormous space. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on her. It had been 6 months since the drill. 6 months of tests, evaluations, and experiments. 6 months of watching perform feats that should have been impossible, again and again, under controlled conditions that left no room for doubt. Now she had been chosen to present the findings to the highest authority in known space. Members of the Council, she began, her voice amplified to reach every corner of the chamber. I stand before you today to present evidence that will change our understanding of human cognitive capabilities. She activated the holographic display, and his face appeared above her, 10 meters tall. He looked uncomfortable even in the recording, a young man who had never wanted attention and now had the attention of an entire galaxy. 6 months ago, Cadet scored 147.2 on the Unified Cognitive Response Index during a routine training drill. This score was considered impossible. The index was designed with a maximum theoretical limit of 100, based on extensive research into the cognitive capabilities of all known species. She showed the data, charts and graphs that mapped brain activity during the drill, comparisons with the best performers of every species in Coalition history, the impossible number, highlighted in red, towering above all others. Since that initial incident, we have conducted over 300 additional tests on Cadet and a sample population of other humans who showed potential for similar abilities. Our findings have forced us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human cognition. A counselor raised her hand. What assumption specifically? The assumption that human neural architecture is average. The assumption that our redundant brain structures are evolutionary inefficiencies. The assumption that cognitive performance can be accurately measured by standard metrics. Pulled up a new set of images, brain scans showing activity patterns unlike anything the Coalition had documented before. Human brains contain what we previously dismissed as redundant systems, multiple regions that appear to perform similar functions, with extensive interconnections that we thought were vestigial remnants of earlier evolutionary stages. We now believe these redundancies serve a different purpose entirely. Which is, they asked, parallel processing under extreme conditions. When a human faces a situation that overwhelms normal cognitive pathways, these redundant systems can activate simultaneously, allowing for a form of intuitive synthesis that bypasses traditional logical processing. She paused to let this sink in. In simple terms, under sufficient pressure, certain human minds can think in ways that no other known species can replicate. They don't calculate faster than us. They calculate differently. They see connections that we can't see, integrate information streams that we can't integrate, and arrive at solutions that our models say shouldn't be possible. An elderly admiral in the front row spoke up. His name was, and he had served alongside humans for 50 years. I have witnessed humans do extraordinary things in crisis situations. We attributed it to luck or recklessness. Are you saying it was neither? I'm saying it was cognition. Cognition that we didn't have the tools to measure or understand. Until now. She showed more data. Combat situations where human officers had made decisions that tactical analysis yet succeeded. Diplomatic negotiations where human representatives had sensed deception that sophisticated lie detectors missed. Engineering problems where human mechanics had found solutions that weren't in any manual and shouldn't have worked. These incidents have been recorded throughout the 60 years of human coalition membership. We always treated them as anomalies, exceptions, statistically insignificant outliers. We now believe they represent a consistent pattern of human capability that we failed to recognize because our measurement systems weren't designed to detect it. How common is this ability? Admiral asked. We don't know yet. Cadet appears to be exceptional even among humans, but our initial screening of Earth's population suggests that perhaps 1 in 10,000 humans possesses some degree of enhanced intuitive synthesis. The ability appears to run in family lines and may be more common in certain genetic populations. The chamber buzzed with whispered conversations. Representatives leaned toward each other, exchanging comments and concerns. A counselor, whose species was known for their exceptional sensory capabilities, raised a translucent hand. If humans possess cognitive abilities beyond our current understanding, what are the implications for coalition structure, for military command, for diplomatic relations? Had expected this question. It was the question everyone was really asking, beneath all the scientific interest and academic curiosity. The implications are significant, she admitted. But I want to be clear about something important. Human-enhanced cognition is not a threat. It's a resource that the Coalition has been underutilizing for 60 years because we didn't know it existed. She switched the display to show a list of recommendations. We propose the establishment of a new training program specifically designed to identify and develop humans with enhanced intuitive synthesis. We propose integrating these humans into mixed species teams, where their unique capabilities can complement the strengths of other coalition members. We propose continued research into the mechanisms underlying human parallel processing, with the goal of potentially developing similar capabilities in other species. You want to make more like him? They asked, gesturing towards Image. We want to understand what makes humans capable of things that surprise us, and we want to use that understanding to strengthen the coalition as a whole. Admiral stood slowly. Despite his advanced age, his voice was strong and clear. I have a story to tell this council. 43 years ago, I served aboard a supply convoy that was ambushed by pirates near the Outer Rim. We were outnumbered. Our tactical computers gave us a 2% chance of survival. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. The captain of our escort vessel was a human woman named. She made decisions during that battle that I still don't understand to this day. She ordered maneuvers that our own systems flagged as suicidal. She positioned our ships in formations that no tactical manual would ever recommend. And she brought every single vessel home without a single loss of life. What happened to Captain? Someone asked. She served another 20 years before retiring with full honors. When I asked her once how she had known what to do during that ambush, she just shrugged and said she saw what needed to happen. Those were her exact words. She saw what needed to happen. Admiral turned to face the full council. I have spent my entire career respecting humans without fully understanding them. Today, I finally have answers to questions I've been asking for 43 years. Instructor and her team have given us something precious: knowledge. Knowledge about allies we thought we knew but didn't. Knowledge that can make us all stronger. He looked directly at. You have my full support. And I suspect you have the support of many others who have served alongside humans and seen things that they couldn't explain. Across the chamber, other voices rose in agreement. Admirals and diplomats, scientists and politicians, all speaking of their own experiences with humans who had done the impossible. The vote, when it came, was nearly unanimous. The Human Cognition Research Initiative was approved, with as its director, and as its first official subject and eventual instructor. Later that evening, found standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. He had watched the entire proceeding from a private viewing room, seeing his face displayed before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "How do you feel?" she asked, joining him at the window. "Overwhelmed," he admitted. "A few months ago, I was a nobody, an average cadet with average scores. Now apparently I'm the key to understanding human potential. Does that bother you?" He considered the question carefully before answering. "My grandmother once told me that gifts are not given for ourselves. They're given so we can help others. I spent my whole life hiding what I could do because I was afraid of being different. Maybe it's time to stop hiding and start helping." "That's a good attitude." "It's her attitude. I'm just trying to live up to it." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars drift past. "What happens now?" asked. "Now we work. We test more humans. We develop training methods. We figure out how to teach others to access abilities they don't even know they have. And we show the galaxy that humans are more than they ever imagined." "That sounds like a lot." Smiled, "It is, but I think we're up to the challenge. We're human after all. Apparently that means more than anyone realized." Smiled too, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since this whole journey began. Somewhere among the stars, the Galactic Coalition was adjusting its understanding of the small, average, unremarkable species called humanity. And somewhere in the hearts of every human who would learn about Story, a new pride was beginning to grow. They had always known they were capable of extraordinary things. Now they had proof, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again.